Some songs make bands legendary. Others become the chains they spend their lives trying to escape. From Kurt Cobain resenting the anthem that defined a generation, to Robert Plant watching a masterpiece turn into "That Bloody Wedding Song," these hits became emotional. Prisons for the artist behind them. Lawsuits, misunderstandings, exhaustion, and fame twisted success into something far darker. These are the rock songs that conquered the world, while quietly haunting the people who created them. At number 10, Oasis, Wonderwall.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you.
It was never supposed to become this. Released in 1995, Wonderwall climbed to number 2 on the UK singles chart and broke into the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100, turning Oasis into a global phenomenon. Acoustic, intimate, almost fragile, a song that sounded like a quiet confession. Somehow became one of the loudest singalongs in rock history, but that's exactly where the problem began. For Noel Gallagher, Wonderwall slowly transformed from something personal into something inescapable, played in every bar, covered by every beginner guitarist, requested by every crowd that only knew one song. What once felt meaningful started to feel mechanical. And then came the misunderstanding. For years, fans believed it was written about a lover, fueling its myth as a romantic anthem. But Noel would later dismiss that idea, stripping the song of the narrative people had built around it. The more the audience romanticized it, the more distant he became from it. On stage, it wasn't rebellion. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter. Detachment. Because Wonderwall didn't just succeed, it defined them. In a band built on swagger, distortion, and attitude, this one soft anthem became the identity the world refused to let go. And that's the curse of a hit like this. It doesn't matter what you write next. It doesn't matter how you evolve. Sometimes, one song becomes the version of you that the world never stops asking for. Number 9, Radiohead, Creep. At first, nobody even wanted it. When Radiohead released Creep in 1992, the song barely made an impact. Some radio stations called it too depressing. Others simply ignored it. But then something strange happened. The song came back, slowly, relentlessly, and before long, Creep exploded worldwide, reaching number 2 on the UK singles chart and turning a young, unknown band into global stars almost overnight. But for Tom York, success came with a price. Because the world didn't just love Creep. They trapped the band inside it. Night after night, crowds screamed for the same song. A song York had written during a moment of insecurity and self-loathing suddenly became the anthem people expected him to repeat forever. While the band evolved into something more experimental, darker and unpredictable, audiences kept dragging them back to 1992, and eventually York snapped. During performances, he became visibly irritated whenever fans demanded Creep. In some concerts, the band refused to play it entirely. At one point, York even told an audience asking for the song to fuck off, not because he hated the music itself, but because he hated what it represented. A cage. The cruel irony is that Creep was written by outsiders, yet its success nearly trapped Radiohead inside the mainstream image they spent their entire career trying to escape. And maybe that's why the song still feels uncomfortable. Because beneath the fame, the charts, and the singalongs, you can still hear a man trying desperately not to become the character he accidentally created. Smells Like Teen Spirit, the song that changed rock music forever, was also the song that slowly destroyed the man who wrote it. When Nirvana released Smells Like Teen Spirit in 1991, it detonated like a cultural bomb. The song climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, pushed Nevermind toward the top of the charts, and turned underground grunge into mainstream rebellion almost overnight. Suddenly, Kurt Cobain wasn't just a musician anymore. He was being treated like the voice of a generation. And he hated that. Cobain had written the song partly as a parody of loud, formulaic rock music. But audiences didn't hear irony. They heard an anthem. Millions screamed lyrics that even Cobain himself found vague and chaotic. The bigger the song became, the more disconnected he felt from it. On stage, that frustration started to show. Some nights, Cobain deliberately played the song aggressively, almost mockingly. Other times, he changed melodies, distorted the performance, or rushed through it as if trying to break the spell surrounding it. To fans, Teen Spirit was liberation. To Cobain, It became expectation, obligation, a permanent shadow following him everywhere. And the cruelest part? The song overshadowed nearly everything else Nirvana created. Cobain admired many of his deeper, quieter songs far more, but the world kept demanding the same explosive anthem again and again. Because once culture turns your pain into entertainment, you no longer fully control what belongs to you. And Smells Like Teen Spirit stopped belonging to Kurt Cobain a long time before he was gone. Number 7. Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. It was never released as a proper commercial single in the United States. No flashy music video. No radio-friendly length. No obvious chorus built for the charts. And yet somehow, Stairway to Heaven became one of the most famous rock songs ever created. Released in 1971 on Led Zeppelin 4, the track slowly transformed into a cultural phenomenon. FM radio stations played it relentlessly. Guitar stores became flooded with teenagers trying to learn its opening notes. Critics called it a masterpiece. Fans treated it almost like mythology. Over time, the song stopped feeling like music and started feeling like ritual. But for Robert Plant, the relationship with Stairway to Heaven became increasingly complicated. At first, the song represented ambition, something mystical, layered and cinematic. But decades of repetition changed everything. The more the public worshipped it, the more trapped Plant seemed to feel by it. Eventually, he openly admitted his frustration, once referring to it dismissively as that bloody wedding song. And that single comment revealed everything, because the song had escaped its creators completely. What was once mysterious became overfamiliar. What once sounded spiritual became background music for parties, weddings, and classic rock countdowns. Fans demanded it constantly, as if Led Zeppelin could never evolve beyond those 8 legendary minutes. Even after the band ended, the song kept following Plant everywhere. Every interview, every concert, every reunion rumor always circled back to the same expectation. Will you sing Stairway? And maybe that's the curse of writing something timeless. The world keeps celebrating it forever, long after the artist has emotionally left it behind. Number 6. Beastie Boys, You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party. It sounded like the ultimate party anthem. Loud guitars, shouted vocals, chaos, rebellion. Released in 1986, You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party exploded into mainstream culture and climbed to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100, turning Beastie Boys into unlikely superstars almost overnight. But there was one problem. The song was supposed to be a joke. The band had written it as satire, a parody of drunk, aggressive party culture and mindless rock, cliches dominating youth culture at the time. Everything about it was intentionally exaggerated. The screaming, the destruction, the stupidity. They thought audiences would understand the irony. Instead, millions embraced it completely seriously. Crowds didn't laugh at the caricature. They became it. Suddenly, the Beastie Boys found themselves surrounded by fans, embodying the exact behavior they were mocking. Concerts became chaotic. Frat boy culture attached itself permanently to the band's image. And the bigger the hit became, the more uncomfortable the group felt watching satire transform into reality. Years later, Mike D admitted the band had started to resent what the song represented. As they matured artistically and politically, Fight for Your Right felt less like clever commentary and more like a misunderstanding frozen in time. And that misunderstanding followed them everywhere. Because once audiences decide what your song means, you don't always get it back. What began as parody became identity. What began as irony became legacy. And for Beastie Boys, the song that launched their career also created an image they spent years trying to outgrow. Number 5. Blur, Song 2.
I got my head shaved.
It was never meant to be taken seriously. In 1997, Blur released Song 2, a chaotic, 2-minute explosion built around distorted guitars, fake American grunge energy, and one unforgettable scream. The song reached number 2 on the UK singles chart and unexpectedly became the band's biggest international hit, especially in the United States. But according to the band, that was almost the joke. At the time, British rock was being consumed by American alternative music. So Damon Albarn and the band intentionally created something exaggerated, almost like a parody of loud, empty arena rock. The lyrics barely meant anything. The structure was intentionally simplistic. Even the title, Song 2, sounded unfinished. as if they never expected anyone to treat it as important. Then the world did exactly that. The track exploded across sports arenas, commercials, movie trailers, and television broadcasts. Suddenly, the most unserious song Blur had ever made became the one that defined them globally. And that created a strange frustration, because while critics praised albums like Parklife for their intelligence and experimentation, millions of casual listeners only knew the band for a 2-minute joke song screaming, "Woohoo." For Damon Albarn, it became another example of how success can distort artistic identity. The deeper, more emotional work often stayed in the shadows, while the loudest, simplest track consumed all the attention. And maybe that's the cruelest part of fame. Sometimes the song you care about least becomes the song the world refuses to forget. 4. The Verve, Bittersweet Symphony. But behind the music was a disaster unfolding in real time. Released in 1997, Bittersweet Symphony became a global phenomenon, reaching number 2 on the UK singles chart and turning The Verve into one of the defining bands of the era. Built around its unforgettable orchestral loop and melancholic lyrics, the song felt enormous, part anthem, part existential breakdown. But almost immediately it became trapped in controversy. The band had licensed a symphonic sample connected to a Rolling Stones composition. Yet after the song exploded worldwide, a legal battle erupted over how much of the sample had actually been used. The result was devastating. Songwriting credits and royalties were handed over to representatives connected to the Rolling Stones, leaving Richard Ashcroft watching his biggest creation become legally tied to someone else. And the bitterness never fully disappeared. Ashcroft later described it as one of the cruelest experiences of his career. Imagine writing the song that defines your life, and then losing control of it just as the world falls in love with it. Every radio play, every commercial, every emotional sing-along became a reminder that the band's greatest triumph also carried humiliation attached to it. For years, the song haunted the Verve in ways fans never saw, not because the music failed, but because success arrived. Handcuffed to frustration, lawsuits, and exhaustion. And maybe that's why Bittersweet Symphony still feels so emotionally heavy, because beneath the soaring strings and stadium-sized chorus, you can hear the sound of a band realizing fame doesn't always mean ownership. Number 3. Creedence, Clearwater Revival. Have you ever seen the rain? By the time Have You Ever Seen the Rain was released in 1971, Creedence Clearwater Revival were already one of the biggest rock bands in America. The song climbed to number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming another massive hit in a career filled with them. On the surface, it sounded warm, reflective, almost comforting, a timeless melody wrapped around quiet sadness. But underneath the music, the band was collapsing. Tensions inside CCR had been growing for years. Constant touring, creative control battles, and personal resentment were tearing the group apart from the inside. At the center of it all was John Fogerty, whose songwriting had largely defined the band's success. While audiences heard nostalgia and hope in Have You Ever Seen the Rain, Fogerty later revealed the song was really about the emotional breakdown happening within the group itself. It was the sound of a band dying in slow motion, and that truth made the song painful to revisit. As years passed, Fogerty's relationship with CCR's catalog became increasingly complicated. Legal disputes with former management poisoned his connection to the music. At one point, he even refused to perform many classic CCR songs live because they reminded him of betrayal, bitterness, and a chapter of his life he wanted to escape. Imagine writing songs that become part of American culture, and then no longer wanting to hear them yourself. That's what made Have You Ever Seen the Rain different from most classic rock hits. The sadness inside it wasn't fictional. It wasn't poetic exaggeration. The fractures were real. The exhaustion was real. The ending was already happening while the song climbed the charts. And maybe that's why the track still feels haunting today, because beneath its calm melody, you can hear something quietly breaking apart. A legendary band watching the storm arrive while pretending everything still sounded beautiful. Number 2. REM, Losing My Religion.
It's bigger than you are not me.
It wasn't supposed to be a hit. No explosive chorus. No traditional rock riff. No obvious commercial formula. In fact, when REM released Losing My Religion in 1991, the song seemed almost too strange for mainstream radio. Built around a delicate mandolin melody and cryptic lyrics about obsession, vulnerability, and emotional collapse, it sounded more like a private confession than a global anthem, and yet somehow it became exactly that. The song climbed to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, dominated MTV, and transformed REM from respected alternative musicians into worldwide stars. Suddenly the song was everywhere. Radio stations, award shows, television broadcasts, and endless interpretation pieces trying to explain what it really meant. But that attention created a problem almost immediately. Millions of listeners misunderstood the title itself. Many assumed losing my religion was literally about faith or spirituality. In reality, the phrase came from a Southern expression meaning to lose one's patience, composure, or emotional control. Michael Stipe repeatedly explained this in interviews, but the public kept attaching their own narratives to the song. The more famous it became, the less ownership the band seemed to have over its meaning, and for Stipe, that disconnect grew exhausting. Because the song was deeply personal, not political propaganda, not religious commentary, not a carefully calculated hit single. It was fragile, ambiguous, human. Yet, mainstream success flattened those complexities into something easier to consume. Over time, losing my religion became both a blessing and a shadow hanging over the band's legacy. No matter how adventurous or experimental REM became afterward, the world kept circling back to the same haunting mandolin line from 1991, and maybe that's the strange loneliness of iconic music. The bigger the audience becomes, the further the original meaning drifts away from the people who created it. Because once a song enters popular culture, it no longer belongs entirely to the artist. It belongs to millions of strangers projecting themselves into it, whether the creator recognizes it anymore or not. At number 1, The Smashing Pumpkins, 1979. It sounded nothing like the band that created it. By 1995, The Smashing Pumpkins had already built a reputation on massive guitars, emotional violence, and chaotic intensity. Albums like Siamese Dream turned the group into alternative rock giants. But then came 1979. Soft drums, dreamlike melodies, a hypnotic loop drifting through suburban memories and teenage emptiness. The song felt less like a rock anthem and more like someone replaying fragments of youth in slow motion. Unexpectedly, it became the band's biggest mainstream crossover success, reaching number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 and dominating MTV throughout the late 1990s. And that success changed everything. For millions of listeners, 1979 became the identity of the Smashing Pumpkins. Not the aggressive experimentation, not the darker emotional complexity, just this nostalgic cinematic haze frozen in time. But for Billy Corgan, the relationship with the song became increasingly complicated over the years. Because while fans wanted to stay inside the feeling of 1979 forever, Corgan constantly wanted to move forward. He spent much of his career reinventing the band's sound, chasing heavier textures, electronic influences, conceptual projects, and ambitious artistic risks, yet audiences kept pulling him backward, toward the same song about adolescence and lost innocence. And eventually that tension became impossible to ignore. In interviews, Corgan often spoke about the frustration of people, reducing the band's legacy to only a handful of radio-friendly moments while ignoring the larger artistic vision. Behind the music, 1979 was never hated in the eye, same way some artists openly despised their hits. But it became symbolic of something else. The fear of becoming creatively trapped by nostalgia. Because nostalgia is powerful. It freezes artists in the exact version of themselves the audience first fell in love with. It demands repetition, familiarity, emotional time travel. Meanwhile, the people who created those songs continue aging, changing and evolving in ways fans sometimes refuse to accept. And that's what makes 1979 quietly tragic. The song captures youth so perfectly that listeners never wanted to leave it behind. But the man who wrote it had no choice except to keep moving forward, even while the world kept asking him to relive the past every single night. Some songs make bands legendary. Others become the chains they spend their lives trying to escape. From Kurt Cobain resenting the anthem that defined a generation, to Robert Plant watching a masterpiece turn into that bloody wedding song, these hits became emotional. Prisons for the artist behind them. Lawsuits, misunderstandings, exhaustion, and fame twisted success into something far darker. These are the rock songs that conquered the world, while quietly haunting the people who created them.